Review key provided by NeoWiz.
Recent years of indie gaming have been dominated by roguelikes and roguelites, with last year's successes of titles like Hades and Neon Abyss leading the way. It's no surprise that a number of developers will make every attempt to cash in on the success of this gaming trend, and for good reason. Gamers like myself feed off of the satisfying gameplay loop of run, die, run again, and finding yourself improving all the while, inching ever closer to success. It's a simple formula, but the little things about each run are what make each title unique and special. Will the game be filled with overwhelming power-ups that drastically change the course of gameplay? Are the rooms randomized in order to make each run feel different from the previous? Will you interact with colorful characters, endearingly voice-acted and emotionally attached to the protagonist? These are the questions upon my mind as I enter each roguelike experience, like Southpaw Games' new release, Skul, the Hero Slayer. And while Skul gets some of this formula right, it perishes in a few key ways that will keep the title from being a classic. In Skul, the Hero Slayer, you play as the titular hero on his quest to rescue his king from an army of warriors, mages, trees, footmen, and soldiers. In reality, you are the small minion mowed over countless times by the hero in other fantasy tales, and you've had enough. Your allies are the typical villains of spiders, ogres, and witches, attempting to assist you along each step of your path. There is a story behind Skul the Hero Slayer, but it's almost entirely irrelevant to your journey, is mostly nonsensical, and comes in such short bursts at such long intervals that I'm surprised they bothered at all. This isn't an issue, mind you. This game stands on its own without deep lore. Changing the style of each run you play will come in the form of donning the skulls of your allies before you. Petty thief, werewolf, pikeman, alchemist. There's a handful of different playstyles at your disposal, but typically, you won't get to choose which. Skulls are randomly generated and distributed as you play, which means you may have to wait several runs to see your favorite skull again. This forces a variety of gameplay upon the player, but actually serves as a small detriment to the game, forcing players to either play out a run in a style they don't like, or endlessly restarting to get the skull they desire. Unfortunately, not all skulls are created equal. Skulls are split into 3 categories: power, balance, and speed, and you can carry up to 2 at a time, occasionally switching between them to suit your needs. However, getting stuck with certain skulls means you'll be decidedly weaker against large foes, or large groups of enemies, and passive playstyles slow down the gameplay significantly. Special abilities on cooldowns typically deal higher damage, or allow you a momentary escape, but the incongruity of gameplay leaves something to be desired. At the end of each stage, or room as it were, you will find a gift for you, be it money, a skull, some item granting permanent buffs, or a usable trinket, known as a quintessence. There's a lot of different currencies abound as well, like bones for upgrading skulls, purple gems for granting small permanent upgrades back at your castle, gold for buying items in the infrequent shop, and occasionally, your own life. Sometimes you'll even get to choose which type of reward you'll receive next, based upon which door you enter at the end of a room. The game does a poor job of explaining these concepts, but after a few hours, I had the hang of it enough to style each run to my liking. Despite the collection of resources and differences of skulls, each run ultimately feels very similar, which leads to quick fatigue as you play the game repeatedly. Most skulls consist of a single base melee attack that, aside from speed and power, is rather indistinguishable. The enemies in each level of the game don't differ. There are only a handful of stage layouts, and each boss you fight is invariably the same every instance you meet them, eventually becoming trivial, unless you've been stuck with a particularly bad skull. Since there are only a handful of enemies in each of the themed levels, difficulty infrequently means new enemies, and is more often more enemies, throwing masses of armor-clad goons at you room after room. Again, unless you were lucky enough to get a skull that deals well against these swarms of soldiers, you're in for a rough time. Getting a powerful skull, however, is very rewarding, and leveling him up from the Spider Woman with collected bones only increases the amount of damage you'll be doing to hapless hordes, and chaining together attacks, dashes, specials, and skull swapping can be a lot of fun. Enemies that might be very powerful become ultimately trivial, and bosses will crumble at your power. A very satisfying feeling. Perhaps this is the most frustrating thing about Skul the Hero Slayer. Some skulls, power-ups, and runs are so much fun, and it's no question to play another one once you inevitably die or succeed, but you're just as likely to have a run where you struggle through every room, doing such little damage and having such poor mobility that you'll consider restarting the game entirely. I am not a game developer, and I shudder to think of the difficulty in balancing so many different skills and items, but such is required from these games, and such should be expected. Skul the Hero Slayer is a very well-made game despite its shortcomings. The pixel art is tremendously fun to look at, and the deep indigos of the Dark Lord's castle are just as beautiful as the banquet hall of the Duke's Keep or the cluttered shelves and boxes of the shopkeep's stalls. All of the animations are smooth and gorgeous with wonderful effects like burning fires, poison clouds, and whipping vines. Though the action on screen can get chaotic, the motion is fluid and is always a pleasure to look at. There's a good base of a game in Skul the Hero Slayer, and fans of the genre will definitely find a few hours of rewarding gameplay offered. The game does work, and well, with only the occasional small graphical glitch that ultimately affected nothing. Running through the game endlessly will grow tiresome quickly for many that play, but for the persistent that find the rare, powerful Skul, you'll be treated with a very fun time. At $19.99 on Steam, it won't break the bank to pick up Skul the Hero Slayer, but for all but the hardcore roguelike crowd, waiting for a sale or inclusion in some online bundle may be a worthwhile exercise in patience. Here at Level Down Games, we rate Skul the Hero Slayer 7.0 out of 10.
Thanks for checking out another one of our reviews brought to you by LevelDownGames.com. Level Down Games is an independent media outlet that survives off the kindness and generosity of viewers like you. If you enjoyed the content, be sure to subscribe to stay informed on all things Level Down Games, and check the description of the video for more important information and links.